Hello, and today is Monday, July 8th. This is Spring Office Hours, Season 3, Episode 25, Zero to Spring Boot. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun Carter. DaShaun, how you doing, my friend?
It is a great time to be a Spring developer. I'm having such a good time right now. I have to report that recently, I got to co-pilot one of your workshops around Spring AI, and it was a joy. It is so much fun. And I combined that with some conversations that I had at the latest DevOps Days Kansas City conference that we had recently. And I put those two together, and I have been having so much fun over the last 5 days that I almost can't hold it in. I'm sharing it. I've got a friend of mine who's going to be presenting based on a lot of the stuff that you did at the workshop. We're going to be presenting at the Java user group in Kansas City next week. And yeah, it's just going great. Like all the new features in the latest 1.0 milestone are so cool. It makes things so easy. There's so many just cool use cases that we can do out of the box. Our friend Todd Libby joined a stream that I was doing Thursday or Friday, and I was like, hey, here it is, and I'm taking a picture of my messy room, and I was like, hey, LLM, like, tell me, like, is my room clean or not? And immediately he goes, that's cool. He goes, what about for alt text? And I was like, well, hey, LLM, could you create alt text for this image? Boom, done. And he's like, yeah, it's short, it's concise, that works, that's amazing. All of these cool use cases that we're just getting started.
Yeah, that's a great use case. I love that.
Yeah. Like, how easy is that? So you and I both have blogs, and there might be a picture or two on there, and maybe they don't all have alt text. We can connect in, it's like 30 lines of code. We can, hey, go look at these images on my blog, and then generate alt text for the ones that don't have it. Boom.
Yeah.
How easy is that?
Yeah, even for like the publishing process, like just do it during that. So you
absolutely you could.
You can catch that before it's
published. On the way. Yeah. So we can go back and catch all the ones that are missing, and then we can just make it a part of our process. I have another fun thing that my mind is blown. I've been using ChatGPT, the open AI version, and I paid for the API. And November 2023, I upped it to $100. I put $100 on the account. You want to take a guess at how much I've used since November 2020?
$1.75.
really close. It was like $1.80. And I was like, what? How is this even like, am I not doing this right?
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, it's really for development. I always tell everybody, like, you're not going to spend a lot of money because you're not doing a lot. But this is something you need to know about if you're going to go to production with an app that uses it.
Yeah. So it's a great time. Things are amazing. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you, Spring Team, for all the work that you've done. One of the things that's top of mind for me is that people are worried about AI taking their jobs. The other things that we've heard together, developers are like, hey, our organization isn't letting us use AI. How do I keep up? How do I make it so that all of this new stuff that's happening, how do I join in? How do I learn these things? And Spring AI makes it so easy. So this presentation that we're doing next week, our focus is we want to talk about things from zero. How using Spring AI on top of Java can make access to these LLMs super simple. And that had me thinking, like, this could literally be something that pulls people into the Java ecosystem, because Spring is amazing. So why don't we maybe take a step back? We're talking about all this cool forward-looking stuff. Why don't we take a step back and talk about how easy it is to become a Spring developer? Like, you're starting from zero. Maybe you've done Python, or maybe you're a COBOL. What does it take to get started? Because we've both dabbled in other languages, and sometimes it's not easy to figure out, like, what's the right thing to do? Like, should I use that version or this version? I go from one project. I recently had a Python thing that I was trying to do, and I had to actually change the operating system. I wasn't able to use the latest operating system. I had to go backwards in order to get this repository to work, in order to get this code to work. And I was like, what? Could you imagine in the Java ecosystem having to roll back your operating system in order to get one of your projects to work? Like, that's just
right. That's crazy.
And even on the boards and all the stuff, it was like, yeah, just roll back to this version that's 8 years old.
Nope.
No, I don't like that. I did not like it.
All right. So as DaShaun mentioned, kind of starting from zero. That's kind of the plan today. Zero to Spring Boot. Where do you get started? You just got a new laptop. You're new to the Java ecosystem. How do you go get started? So we're going to talk through that today. As always, we do this live stream every Monday, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. So if you are here in the live stream, please go ahead and do us a favor and get your questions in. Part of this contract is we want to help you answer some of the questions that you have. So get those questions in. And if you're unable to join us live, hey, there's a replay of this. You can go ahead and catch a replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel, or you can always catch us on wherever you get your favorite podcast, because we go ahead and turn this live stream into a podcast. So get those questions in.
If you're here and you are live and you've got a question about anything, when you come to my house for dinner, if you leave hungry, that's your fault. You got questions, get them in the chat. We might not answer them right away, but we're putting stars on these ones. And when we find a time and it fits into the conversation, we're going to get to them. And if we don't get it on the live stream, we'll get to it at some point. But get your questions asked, because we've got a great community here as well. And
here's a question. Any plans for a meet in London? Oh, man, I wish.
Have one?
Yeah, Josh and Cora were there, I believe. I think
at least part of our team was there just a couple of weeks ago.
But no, nothing on the books yet. I've never been to London. Would love to make it there one day soon. Hello from Barcelona. Oh, I have been to Barcelona though, twice.
That was a good time.
Maybe a third time this year. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, love Barcelona. Ambu checking in. Hi everyone. This is what I was thinking when you were talking about that too. Here's a comment that says AI taking our job. That is not going to happen. AI is for artificial intelligence, no real intelligence. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely things that AI has already automated, taking jobs in the world, and will continue to do so. But I think as a developer, the more that I've understood what AI is, because AI is a very broad term, what are we talking about when it comes to AI in our field, the more I've started to understand it, the more, you'll hear this from everyone, that I just understand that it's a tool in our tool belt right now.
It's a tool.
It is not replacing us. It may one day, but the current iteration of it is not, for sure.
I think if I understand, like when developer says, I feel like I'm missing out, it's not necessarily that they think their job is going to be replaced. It's that somebody else with the skill set, with this tool of LLM, generative AI, they're maybe going to replace them, right?
Yeah.
They don't
making
want
us
to
more
miss
productive
out on this tool set that is clearly powerful and is clearly, at least we're on a little bit of a hype cycle right now, but man, is it powerful.
Does Spring have a plan to develop a TCP server framework? Currently only Netty.
I don't think so. I've not heard of anything. And here's the cool thing. In case you didn't know, Spring is open source. And if you would like to guide the roadmap, all you've got to do is open up an issue. Say, I have a feature request. I'd like to see something. And in there, you would say, Netty is supported, but I don't like Netty because. Is there another option? Could we come up with another option? There it is. But good question. I am kind of curious to hear more about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Get your questions answered.
Another question. Do you have a use case where big insurance can use Spring AI? I'm pretty sure, we can't name names, but I'm pretty sure that that's already happening. So again, and again, AI is, one of those big terms. I don't know about Spring AI. I don't know what they're specifically doing with it, but obviously the idea of like machine learning is happening everywhere within insurance companies, financial companies to kind of predict, right? But I can't think of a specific use case of where someone is using Spring AI.
I can think of one not where they are using it, but where they might be using it.
All right.
We've seen one of the insurance providers. They have their little app, and their little app is, hey, take a picture of your accident. Right? Take a picture on the spot. You don't have to wait in line and call the agent before you get your thing. You can just take pictures. Here's what it is. Take a picture of the other people involved, and then you can move on. Like, hey, we've got all your information. Well, those pictures, just like we said earlier, with the current milestone release, those pictures, we can actually translate. We could actually say, hey, is there a car in this picture? Can you see the damage? We can have the AI describe what's going on in those pictures so that you're not on the side of the highway having to do all the, well, this is what happened and here's how. You can get some details straight from the pictures. We're just scratching the surface. And the more I think about insurance, the more use cases I can see. The big thing, when I'm talking about big insurance, the big thing that I hear from our ecosystem is that companies are afraid to send any of that information out to the OpenAIs, the Bedrocks of the world. They want to have it internal. They want to kind of like, in case things are sensitive, they want to have these tools, these LLMs, be able to analyze their data and keep that information internal. That's the big thing. But can Spring AI help? Yes. I'm going to say that. Yes. Yes, it can.
Jonathan says, isn't Reactor Netty that one? Yeah. Also check out TCP Connection Factories section of Spring Integration Docs.
Jonathan, thank you so much. You're the best. Like, we are so lucky to have Jonathan, one of the leads on Spring Observability. He likes to stop in every once in a while, answer questions. Get your questions asked, get them answered by Jonathan. Like, that's how lucky are we today? What a day. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Anything else here? Let me go ahead. Again,
let me jump on this one because you're kind of scratching my itch. Spring AI is rarely used in current scenarios, and Spring is in urgent need of IoT architecture to support multi-protocol. Just so everybody's aware, I'm a big fan of running Spring Boot on the edge. These IoT use cases. If you didn't realize, Spring Framework 6, Spring Boot 3, they introduced these native images. And these native images gives us the ability to run production-ready, enterprise-grade workloads on Raspberry Pi devices, on these IoT type devices. And we can do multi-protocol. I can do HTTP, I can do RSocket, I can do tons of things on these devices with Spring Boot apps. I would love to hear more. My calendar is available if you'd like to chat. But yeah, you're speaking my language. I definitely want to hear more.
Yeah, and it's always not a safe bet to make statements, blanket statements like Spring AI is rarely used in current scenarios. I don't know that you have the knowledge to make that statement of
lucky.
where Spring AI is being deployed.
It's
we
not
do.
even GA, and we know that it's being used.
But we know of a lot of situations that are happening behind the scenes. Maybe they're not public, but we go out and talk to companies all the time, and this is one of the number one things they're asking us for. So
stay tuned. It'll be public soon. Keep coming here. Check out the podcast.
One more comment here before we get started. Can you suggest any books on Spring that uses advanced topics like events? So one, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Most Spring books that you find out in the wild are going to be on a specific topic or Spring in general. And when they're in Spring in general, they have to paint a broad brush, right? Like they're trying to introduce Spring to someone who's never used it before. So I would say the number one place that I would look for information like that is the documentation. We talk about it all the time on the show. The documentation for Spring and all the projects around there are really great. So that's where I would start, or look for a specific book on that topic that you're looking for.
There is one book that comes to mind from our friend Chris Richardson, and it is the Cloud Native Patterns book from Manning. I think that's right. No, that's Cornelius. Sorry, which is also a good one. I want to find the Chris Richardson one. It's Microservice Patterns from Manning. I'm going to put this URL. And this is one on the different like event messaging, event-based architectures. This is a book that kind of just jumps to the top of my mind when you ask that question. So here you go. Take a look.
Cool. Couple more comments here real quick. It was nice getting to see you both at KCDC. Yes, it was nice seeing you. It was nice seeing everyone. KCDC still top of mind. Still top of mind because I lost my luggage, and it is finally coming back. Is finally coming back tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, KCDC was such a great conference. Already have dates for next year. I think they moved it to August is what I saw.
It's going to be an August conference next year. So have to wait even more than a year.
Man.
It was a great conference. Conference keeps on getting better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. And then I think one more comment from Guru. Spring security is hard to learn. Absolutely. There is a lot to learn when it comes to security.
Yeah, you take Spring off of that one. Security is hard to learn.
Very important. Yeah, it's one of those things that you got to get it right because it is critical to your applications. So,
and I'll tell you what, if you think doing security with Spring is hard, try doing it without. Try securing things without Spring security. then we'll see what hard is.
Just top of mind, we were in Barcelona. We talked about Barcelona for Spring I/O. There are a bunch of recordings for all the talks at Spring I/O. We were front row for Daniel Garnier Moreau's talk on Spring security kind of architecture fundamentals. And I even interviewed him on this show before Spring I/O, and we talked about some of those things. So go back and look at that episode. Go find his recording from Spring I/O. I think it was a really good kind of level set place to start, understanding that if you know like the building blocks of Spring security, then you can go off and do your own thing. If you just go into Spring security with like, I need to do this specific thing and these three other things, and just try to do it by Stack Overflowing, copy and pasting, like it's going to be very hard that way. But if you can kind of learn the fundamentals and build from there, I think that's a really good place to start.
Fantastic.
Anything else here?
Like tons of great questions. I love this.
Yeah.
But maybe let's jump in a little bit. And
all right.
Yeah.
You know, one place that we always like to start is calendar.spring.io. this is a really good place to kind of find out what is on the schedule for spring releases. Again, not just Spring Framework, not just Spring Boot. There are a bunch of projects in the ecosystem, and it's really hard for us to keep up. And we get to do this every day, DaShaun. So this is a really good place to kind of look and find out where some of your projects are, some of your favorite projects, what the roadmap looks like. And here we are on Monday, July 8th. There is a bunch going on. So we have, again, depending on how you want to say it. Now I know there is no wrong way because everybody says it different. Micrometer or micrometer. You will not get yelled at if you say it either way. And I know Jonathan's here, so he'll probably
so he can type it and we can guess again.
No, but I talked to him, Jonathan and Tommy, and they both said it different ways. So I was like, yes, it's not just me. All right. So we have some really great releases on Micrometer, Reactor Netty, which we just talked about later this week. We have an updated version of Spring Framework. That's Spring Framework 6.1.11. And some Spring Data, Spring Helios updates later this week. Also, I'm just kind of peeking down on the calendar. I don't know if this is, I'm pretty sure this is up to date as far as Spring AI goes, but we were talking about Spring AI. On the 23rd, it looks like there's a Milestone 2 release.
What?
Ooh, that would be very exciting.
That would be
And I know if you go back, I can't remember exactly what it was. If you go back and look at the Spring AI Milestone 1 release notes, there's a blog post on the Spring AI blog. It talked about some of the things they were working towards in Milestone 2. So you can take a look at that as well.
fantastic. Yeah, everything is just moving so fast.
Jonathan said, I think on our Spring I/O talk, the correct pronunciation of micrometer can be heard by Tommy. So he's saying he says it.
Fantastic.
Right.
So maybe we have a consensus here.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not going to judge anyone.
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
going to
no.
judge.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, make sure we know. I want to point this one out. Ganesh says, hey guys, this month I joined my first job as a junior Spring Boot developer with all your support. Like, how cool is that? I appreciate hearing that, Ganesh. Absolutely. Congrats from both
Congratulations.
of us and from Jonathan. Congrats. Thank you for sharing that story with us. It means a lot. It means a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we're here to kind of help the community, help answer your questions, help provide you with resources along your journey, whether it's getting that first job or, 20 years in the business. So that's really cool to hear. So that is calendar.spring.io. Go ahead and bookmark that. That is a good resource. Something else I wanted to quickly mention. It is summer. It's July. We are getting closer and closer to August. SpringOne is coming to you. You don't have to go to SpringOne. SpringOne's coming to you. This year, join us online for free or in person at VMware Explorer. We're basically having, a bunch of us are going to be there in person, giving in-person talks, but we're going to be live streaming a lot of these events. So if you want to use the virtual conference format, you can go ahead and sign up for free for the live stream. So do this here at springone.io.
I think Vince was just kind of jumping the gun a little bit. Vince was asking, like, hey, how am I supposed to keep up? I want to master this stuff. How do I do it? And there it is. You start with spring.io and you grow at SpringOne. And you can sign up for free, get all the latest and greatest tips and tricks and all the advanced topics as well from SpringOne. Sign up there. This is a great spot. You were just ahead of it. If you wait a couple more seconds, we would have answered that question for you. This is where you go.
Yeah, and I think, especially with something like Spring, we've talked about this numerous times on this show. It's such a large ecosystem of projects to solve a number of different problems that you really need to have a problem in mind. You need to have some type of strategy when it comes to learning Spring. Like, I need Spring to be able to do this. Like, if you just say, I want to learn Spring in general,
That's a lot.
I'm still doing that. So,
That's a lot.
so yeah, so that's not going to happen. So if you kind of narrow that down to, I need to build a REST API that talks to a database. Okay, now we have something we can kind of work with, right?
Yes.
So I would say start there and build from there. Like as your requirements come in for projects, maybe you need to pull in another project into there and learn that thing. And that's really kind of how it will happen. It'll happen over time. You're not just going to learn Spring in the next 3 months.
I like to say that there are infinite ways to get there, but there are no shortcuts. If you want to get better at something, do more of it. And if you've got questions along the way, this is where you go. You come here, you get your questions answered, and then you keep on going and you keep on doing more of it.
Love it. One more comment. You guys made a really useful video and it's helped me a lot in my senior software developer journey. That's great.
Amazing.
Like I said, it is something that we, this is a resource for people who've just getting started, for people who've done this for number of years. So we appreciate that comment.
Spring makes getting things done easy. And in some cases, really enjoyable. Like the mean time to dopamine, that thing of I'm done. This is ready for production. Getting from 0 to that is really, really fast with Spring. And that is a big part of why the ecosystem is so amazing and everybody's willing to help because everybody wants everybody else to get to production. It's amazing.
Speaking of getting into production, DaShaun,
yes,
let's get into our topic for today, which is 0 to Spring Boot. I am completely brand new to Spring, and I want to take my Hello World application. I want to see this into production.
Yeah.
Woo, where do we start? So I think before, we've done a topic on learning Spring. We just talked about learning Spring, right?
Yeah.
Let me bring my screen back up too. There's a show on learning Spring, so if you want to go back and kind of take a look at that, we have a really good repository for learning Spring, and this is not it. Is it Spring Office Hours? This one. So if you look at this and go to repositories, there are resources for learning Spring, which a number of people that have come to this show have gone ahead and contributed to. So this was season 3, episode 14, and we went through and then created a whole GitHub repo of resources for learning Spring. So this is a really good place to learn Spring. But we want to kind of start with I know a little bit of Java. I think that is kind of, I think that's a kind of a prerequisite for this. Do you not?
What if, right? Again, in my head, what if you've been using COBOL? And you hear about this AI and you've already kind of dodged a bullet once with the COBOL and not a lot of jobs. But now you love what you do and you would like to keep on doing what you're doing. And this LLM AI thing is coming along and you want to get into it. You can't do it with COBOL.
Well, if you're a COBOL developer, you're just sitting on piles of cash. So why would you want to leave that?
Because they're worried. Because this AI hype train it's coming and they can see it. And it's not that hard to go from 0. So I'm saying let's just start from 0. Let's say you've not done Java at all.
So 0, then and it's funny. I'm trying to think through this because I would think about this approach different on the JavaScript landscape, but let me just focus here on the Java landscape. I think you need to have a solid foundation of Java before you got into Spring. Whereas a lot of people who get into front-end development, if I know HTML, CSS, and maybe I saw some JavaScript somewhere, I believe you can get into building front-end applications by using one of the frameworks and kind of learning things as you go from there. I don't know why, but I feel like at least on the Spring side, I feel like you need to have a little bit of a fundamental understanding of Java before you can kind of get into the Spring side of things, right?
Yeah, because Spring sits on top of Java. It's a framework.
It's a meta framework, right?
To make Java easier.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and you're going to run into a lot of things you need to know the fundamentals. And I would even say once you get past the fundamentals of Java, understanding things like annotations. Spring relies heavily on annotations, right? Understanding what an annotation is, not necessarily how to build your own, but just being able to like look at them and go, okay, that is what this thing can do for me. So yeah, before you get into the Spring, I would think getting started with Java, fundamental to intermediate, I think somewhere in there is probably a good kind of range to be in. What do you think?
I'm a little on the other side, and I guess we'll discover, because if I'm bringing somebody new into programming in general, I start with Spring. Like, I'm not going to do weeks on Java packages and what you get out of the box. I'm literally going to start with, let's get something that you can show. Let's do a Spring Boot app running on Tomcat, and let's go. And you're going to hit port 8080 to see your hello world. I mean,
so somebody who's not new to programming, yes. Somebody who's new to programming, different story.
There you go.
But yes, I believe I could go over to PHP and Laravel right now. And yes, I would probably jump into a Laravel project because I'm used to building MVC projects.
Yep.
And just kind of learn PHP as I go. But if I'm brand new to programming, I wouldn't jump into Laravel. I'd probably need to like learn PHP first. But
yeah,
I also never
mind. yeah, we don't like to say those words. But yeah, like we got options. So whether you have a little Java baseline or not, you get a new laptop. You're in a new job, let's say, and you've just been given a new laptop. What do you do first?
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing that you do? Whether you're on a Mac, what's the first thing you do?
I have a guide. I used to like set up Macs like every 3 to 4 years. Now I think I'm on 4 years on my M1. I haven't set one up in a long time. But I do have a guide somewhere of like what I go through to like set things up. Usually it's like install Chrome first, and then something like iTerm. So I use like iTerm with ZSH. And as soon as those kind of foundations are set up, then it's okay, SDK man, what homebrews do I need to install to get going? Yep.
First thing. This is first thing for me. I'm going to install Homebrew.
Yeah.
I'll use Safari, but I'm going to install Homebrew first.
Yep.
That's
because that gets you everything.
Right. And even on, actually, no, like on a Windows machine, I've got a couple of those.
Chocolatey?
Yep. I'm installing Chocolatey. And on my Raspberry Pis and all the other Linux boxes, I use Ubuntu, so I get apt. I get a package manager with the operating system. So a package manager, Yum, apt, Chocolatey, Homebrew. There's dozens of them, but this is kind of a baseline. I don't want to make any assumptions on what operating system that you're on, but get a package manager first, because then all the other things that we're talking about, or a lot of the other things that we're going to talk about, you can kind of install with a package manager.
Yeah, and I'm with Jonathan here. Then I have a repo with all my dot files and install setup scripts. Correct. So I have like, hey, I'm looking for it now. I'll find it in a second. But I have like a list of like things that I do. And part of that list is, yes, like I have all these like settings files and dots files, because those are the things that take so much time to kind of replicate.
And I'm pretty sure that I adopted that practice from Jonathan years ago. I do have a repository, that has my brew file to pull things down. And yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, so I go into a lot. Like I think I wrote these things more like blog posts, like, hey, this is what I do. Because I always find it, we talk about this all the time. A lot of times when we go to presentations at conferences, like I want to pick one thing out. I want to learn one thing about what the presenter is presenting on. But a lot of the things I learn are like little subtle tips that like something they use on their laptop, some way they configured something, some shortcut that I didn't know about. Yeah. And those things are always cool. So I think that's why I started writing these up. Like, hey, this is how I set my Mac up.
If we deliver enough stuff in an hour, then maybe For you, the audience, there'll be one thing that you can go home with. And sometimes that's all it takes. But a package manager, the package manager concept is great. Start there.
Oh, before you can do anything, you got to do that Xcode select install. Xcode has nothing to do with Homebrew, but for some reason you got to do that, right? Now, shell. That's another thing. We mentioned shells. I said I kind of install iTerm and I use all my ZSH. What do you use for a shell?
You just use out of the box.
Out of the box
terminal.
Huh?
Yep.
We got to move you over, man.
Why?
There are so many things you can do. So many fun things.
Okay, give me some examples.
You get a lot of plugins for ZSH. A lot of things that kind of come out of the box. You get like you get a lot of these like aliases, especially with like Git, right? You probably have some Git shortcuts that you set up. I get a lot of those out of the box. Like if I want to go ahead and type Git status, instead of that, I get to just type GST. That's kind of a shortcut that comes out of the box with it. There are a bunch of plugins for ZSH and iTerm, and then you can kind of configure like how it looks and how it acts. So I find it does a lot of like the little things for me. So
right on. I'm a Bash guy.
And I customize my icon. So
I'm going to say this, that you always give a great presentation, and your terminal is in fact a really beautiful part of your presentations.
There you go. That's part of the good work. It's the spaceship theme with Oh My. So
good stuff. So we got a package manager. We know how to use the shell. That's kind of valuable because with Java, it's a compiled language. And I'll be honest, I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know if I could take a Spring Boot project and I could get it to compile and build if I didn't have a build tool like Maven or Gradle. I don't know. I could probably figure it out. It might take me a little bit of Java C -- help, but the build tool is a really important part of it, not just Spring, but I think Java at large. And we have a couple of options for build tools. We haven't even got into the JVM yet.
Now, well, back up. We were talking about like Homebrew, installing that because you install everything else. One of those things we have to install was SDK Man. Then we can install a few different versions of Java.
SDK Man? What's SDK Man?
Yeah, Software Development Kit Manager. So we talked about your Python issue earlier, right?
Yes.
With somebody commented too, there's like an environment manager similar to this for Python. So you may want to look into that. But this is a way to kind of install multiple versions of software development kits. Now, this works with Java, but it works with a lot of other SDKs out there. But for Java, it's really big. Like in the past, we would have to go out to whatever the website is, whether it was Oracle or OpenJDK, and download java.sun.com. We'd have to download that specific version. Like I want to download Java 17.0.1. I would download on my machine. I would have to like set up the environment variables
Java Home
so that it's pointing to Java Home, right?
Path.
And now I have that done. And now that's cool. I'm working on Java 17, but now I switch context tomorrow, and now I'm working on a legacy project that's on Java 8. And I need to download that and then change my environment variables. So yes, so not a lot of fun. So SDK Man helps us with that. You go SDK list Java, you can see all the versions. There's a ton of different vendors out there, as we talk about all the time, different choices for different things, right? And you can go ahead and install a specific version of the JDK. We work with GraalVM a lot. Like we're creating native images, so we want to install the GraalVM JDK to create that native image. We can switch over to that quickly. So it helps with that. And another thing I really love about SDK Man is if you're using it, you can do like an SDK, a init, I believe it is.
SDK env init.
Env init. And now you can create this like dot file in your project to say, anybody who downloads this, I want you to switch to this specific version of the JDK. Makes it so much easier, right?
So you and I, we had a repository that things weren't working the way we expected it. You shared the repository, and in it, I believe there was an SDK man file. So when I checked out your repo,
Yeah.
I had SDK Man installed. I had it set up in my bash environment. So when
Yep.
I jumped in there, it said, "Oh, we're going to switch to this version of the JDK,"
You're
and
like,
I can validate on the same JVM, and we get it.
yeah.
That makes it just it's a really
Yeah.
nice
It
capability and
is.
feature.
Right. So now that I have a version of Java in there, now we can like start moving towards a build tool. But we talked about build tools, right? There's Maven, there's Gradle.
Ant,
If you're really old, there's Ant.
SBT, Make.
I,
Jonathan likes to use Make still.
I mentioned another one, and I want to get into this in a future show, but I heard about this on a podcast with Adam Bean. It's called BLD, and it's written in Java. So it's pure Java, no XML, no Groovy, Kotlin, Gradle. Like this is, you just extend a class and you kind of build a build tool out of this system. So I want to do some exploration into that later, but that's for a later show. But anyways, a build tool. You don't actually need to install one of these, right? So we can use SDK Man to install Maven if we want to. We can install Gradle if we wanted to. But one of the things that happens when you create a new Spring Boot application is you get a wrapper with it. And that means the same thing that we just talked about, right? Like if I download a project that has this kind of SDK config file in it, it says, hey, you're going to use this specific version of Java, which helps us out a lot. A Maven wrapper, a Gradle wrapper says, hey, when you download this project, you are going to use this specific version of Maven because I don't want you on your local machine running some version of Maven that's not compatible with this project, right?
Yeah, why?
So we just use a Maven wrapper.
I don't want that installed on my machine because I'm jumping from project to project. When I go into that project, I want to use the same build tool as that project. I want to use the same JVM as that project. I don't want to have all that stuff installed on my machine.
Right.
And
so, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and you get it. You don't have to have those things. And when you're using that application, the wrapper will pull down the binaries that it needs on your machine. We don't have to store them in the repository either.
Right. So then the question becomes, okay, if I don't need Maven yet, how do I get started? And we know Josh's second favorite place on the internet is start.spring.io. This is really where we get started because we have Java installed. We'll talk about an IDE in a second, but I don't even need that right now. I can just kind of create my own project. So one of the things I've been talking about lately is the Spring Initializer. There's a new feature on here that I really enjoy, is that if I am used to creating certain types of projects all the time, like I create Java projects and I use Maven. That's kind of the build tool that I'm going to go with in this example. If I come back here later and I refresh this, those selections are already remembered for me. Yeah, because I used to like generate projects with the wrong settings, not based on what I want to use. So I love this. But that's where that comes in. What DaShaun said, you have options here. This is where you need to make that first kind of selection. What build tool am I going to use? I'm using Maven. Which language am I going to use? I'm using Java. Which version of Java am I going to use? Again, we could switch between things like 17, 21, 22. Now, you need to be on at least JDK 17 because Spring Boot 3 requires a baseline of JDK 17. So, what do we got?
Harpreet, I think that you are throwing a softball up here. Harpreet says, what are your thoughts about build packs? You know my thoughts on build packs. You've been here before.
Yes.
Friends don't let friends use Docker files. We're going to come back to that.
Yeah, let's save that for when we kind of get our... Yeah. Yeah, you know. So we kind of fill out some metadata about our project, and then we add some dependencies. What are dependencies, DaShaun? Like, what am I doing here? This comes back to, I think, the thing we were talking about before with Spring is really big and can do a lot of things.
Yep.
So what are we doing here?
One of the benefits of Spring, right, that you don't get with just Java, right? One of the things that we're doing here with this build tool and with Spring is Spring has what's called a release train. Back in my career, early, not so long, I'm not that old, I was doing things with Ant, and one of the problems that we had was having the right versions of tools that would work together. So I would have, let's say, 5 different third-party dependencies, things that we weren't building in-house, things that were open source, that we were trying to use in our project. like a database driver, for example. But then I wanted to use maybe an ORM on top of that database driver, and the versions didn't work together. And there wasn't like a centralized place to go and find out which version of this should I be using with this. And it was a mess. And not only that, but we were storing them all in CVS. Like the binaries were in CVS. So when you checked out a project, it was this big bloat, and it took a long time to download because we didn't have the gigabit Ethernet back then. And it was a mess, and it was a problem. Anytime that we wanted to patch or upgrade one of those dependencies, we would have to play the dance. We'd have to do the dance on what version do I need to update of this and that. And it was a problem, and it was a pain. And I'm glad that you don't have to deal with that today. Spring provides a release train so that if I'm using things from the Spring ecosystem, maybe I started at start.spring.io, this list of dependencies, anything that I choose on that list of dependencies is guaranteed to work together with the version I've selected for Spring Boot. And this is amazing.
And not only that, but if I go to like a dependency and I choose something like web is a starter. This is a starter that is made up of many dependencies. And as DaShaun said, all the dependencies in that starter are known to work together. Like with web, we use a version of Tomcat. We use a version of Jackson data binding. Everything there is known to work together. At the same time, if you need a specific version and you want to kind of live life on the edge and say, no, I want to use the latest version of Jackson, you can go into your Palm in this case, because we're using Maven, and say, I want to declare the actual version of Tomcat or Jackson that I want to use. So, but these are known to work together. If you use a different version, then you have to like kind of test that out on your own.
This is so great. This is one of my favorite features of Spring is this release train. So that when the new version of Spring Boot comes out, I think I saw a 3.4 early release. I don't know if it was RC or a milestone. It's right around the corner. We're getting a new version of Java every 6 months. We're getting a new version of Spring Boot every 6 months. So this release train concept really helps you to upgrade and keep your code updated and patched and maintainable. And what a beautiful feature that is. So there's a lot of things that you do not have to worry about that we had to worry about. You know, these things were built to solve some problems around the language. Build tools, release trains, dependency management like Maven and Ivy and etc. These are awesome things that you get today.
So the dependencies, I like pick out what type of application I'm going to build, say like a web application. I click generate, it downloads a zip file for me on my machine.
Amazing.
Where am I going to open that? What am I going to do with that?
Well, I'm normally jumping into a terminal and unzipping. So I think whether I'm on a Windows machine, a Mac, or Linux, that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it in a terminal. So we already talked about that. And once I unzip it, I usually want to open it up in an IDE.
Yeah.
I don't have to though.
I'm much more of a visual person. I do all the clicky things. So I open it up in Finder, double click the zip file, boom, there's all my files, drag it into an IDE, and it opens up in an IDE. So again, there's no wrong way to do things.
But I don't even have to open it up. The projects that I get from start.spring.io, because they have the Maven wrapper, because we're using Java, if I've installed SDK Man, I can simply say .mvnw spring boot run, spring-boot : run. And I can, hey, is this working? If I add a third-party dependency, I can say, oh, am I good? Is this 3.3.1 project going to work with this third-party dependency? My latest Oracle driver, for example, is it going to work? And I can validate it. I don't even have to open my IDE. I can check a bunch of these boxes out of the gate.
So if you wanted to open it up in an IDE, you have some choices. IntelliJ is a big one in the community. There is a community version and an ultimate version. The community version will get you so far. The ultimate version has like a bunch of Spring specific things that you might be interested in. There is Eclipse. So there are different flavors of Eclipse, right? But there's Spring STS, Spring Tool Suite. So if you want to use Eclipse, that is free. Wait a minute.
Free. No, you went over that real fast. Yeah. STS is the Spring Tool Suite?
Yeah, so Eclipse is a general purpose IDE, right? And like a lot of IDEs, it has plugins for everything. Like, hey, if I want to do Java development, I think the base like Eclipse one that you pull down comes with some of that Java stuff. But if you want to do Spring specific things, the Spring team has put together kind of a plugin for Eclipse called the Spring Tool Suite, right?
Yeah. So it's something we can download, and it's Spring centric. It's got all the bells and whistles for Spring centric development, and it'll make your life really easy. So
I love that comment, by the way. Let's go Clicky team.
Yes, I saw
I'm
that.
I'm Team Clicky.
Clicky team.
All right.
So what's an IDE again?
A play. Well, so and again, we can back up. You don't even need an IDE. You could use something like a text editor. So there's things like Visual Studio Code. I used to write in Notepad back in the day. Yeah, whatever.
I used JEdit.
Yeah.
Is that still a thing? JEdit.
There's a few of those.
Right. That was one of those.
Java.
Yes,
yeah. I used a few of those.
Written in Java.
But if you were simply opening up like a Java source file, you could use a text editor. When it comes to like projects and doing full blown like even a Java project these days, I use like Maven, even if it's a single one class, because I know eventually I'm gonna need some dependency that I'm gonna need to pull in. So yeah, an IDE is gonna help you with managing that project, being able to give you a lot of tools around it, a lot of IntelliSense, a lot of the things that make it easier to and more productive as a programmer. And I always tell people this. I am a huge fan of IntelliJ, but I always tell people, listen, open this project in whatever text editor, IDE,
VI. We can have
Vim,
that.
If you use some kind of like holographic toy to like open these up, like however you're most productive in, that is the best IDE for you.
Yes.
Because we're all different. Yeah.
Yep. Everybody's got like again the water. Which water do you pick down the aisle? Which cereal do you pick? Which IDE? It's okay. Like we're all going to production. Do whatever works for you.
NetBeans is another option
NetBeans
in the Java world.
And every once in a while, somebody likes to. Yeah, there's always one in every audience. Yeah, I'm the NetBeans guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hit it. But yeah, in my circles on Twitch, for example, there's a lot of Vim developers where I think they're actually contributing to Vim, but they're using Vim and they do all the stuff. Their hands don't leave the keyboard. They are switching between files, and that's a cool experience. I've tried it many times. I can't get with it. I've just been using IntelliJ for so long that that's my happy place.
I like this comment. I print out my code on paper and write it out on a pencil and scan it back in.
That's not real.
I honestly used to print code out early in my days.
I mean, we've all done it.
And like read it to see if I could like understand it better and like study it. So that made me laugh because I used to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've all done it, but we don't do that anymore. I can tell.
Sure don't.
If you've already picked that you're on team clicky, then there's no way that you're still printing out code.
You click a button to print. Yeah. So, okay. So we open it up in an IDE, gives us a lot of the tools. Because we chose like the Maven and the Java from start.spring.io, we have this Maven wrapper now. So in there is a folder for MVNW. It has all the stuff that you need to run the project without having Maven installed, which is really nice. And then you can run the program from a terminal using that Maven Spring Boot run command, or you could do the clicky things from the IDE, like in IntelliJ. There's a green play button. You can just say, "Hey, run this," and that will run your project. And you have a Java and a Spring Boot application up and running. Doesn't do anything interesting right now, but all of the bits and pieces behind the scenes that it took to get this up and running, if you had to do from like scratch by yourself, would probably blow your mind. Like there's a lot going on behind the scenes, right? Just to get an embedded Tomcat web app up and running. Like we used to spend a day copying existing projects over and changing names and packages just
Somebody
to like
else's.
start a new
We're going to
project.
copy it from her computer because it works really good on her computer. She didn't have a lot of
Right,
custom stuff. So copy
right,
her Tomcat folder to
right,
yours.
right.
And then after you Java C compile and you have your class path set up the right way, then you get it. And no, there's no difference between your test class path and your compile class path because who's got time for that? You just
Yep,
do it and then you copy that jar file and then you throw it into that Tomcat and then you
yep,
go, you don't have to do that anymore.
yep,
All of that pain and all of that like, oh, the boring stuff, the not
yep.
fun stuff, you don't have to do that.
Cool. So I have an application running. Maybe I wanted to do something. So web app, I would, again, this is where coming into like, okay, now I understand how to get started with Spring. Now I need to learn Spring. What are some of the things I need to do? So having a focus, in this case, I want to create a web application that you can call an endpoint and you can return a string like hello world, right? So that is, how do I create a REST API in Spring? Maybe that talks to a database. This is where the Spring documentation is a really good place to start. This is where the Spring guides. So the guides kind of tell you like, how do you build a REST API or how do you connect to a database? Those things, again, with all the other things we listed in the resources for learning Spring, that we will add to the show notes. That's a great place to learn. But okay, I go in, I create a REST controller that prints out hello world. I run my application, I go to the browser or use a command line tool to kind of test that endpoint and it works. It prints out hello world. I have an application. I have my hello world application. It works. What's the next step? I want to get it to production, right?
You want to get to production.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like today, we're not grabbing jar files typically. I mean, what we see right out in the ecosystem.
Yep.
There's definitely places, but the majority of organizations that we interface with, the majority of developers that we are interfacing with, they are using containers. Sometimes they say Docker containers. I like to say Open Container Interface, OCI containers, because friends don't let friends use Dockerfile. And with Spring, with this ecosystem here, you can generate OCI images, the new Docker. You can generate these OCI images out of the gate. You have to have a Docker runtime, Docker or Containerd or something similar, Podman. But you can MVNW, Spring Boot, build image. These things you get out of the gate, these production building containers is something that you don't have to stress about. The Maven plugin or the Maven plugin or the Gradle plugin for Spring Boot provides this task, this ability to generate OCI images using build packs. And you get that out of the gate. You get the latest and greatest version of that build pack and you can generate your OCI images. And that's nice. And that's what you should do. You should use build packs.
What if I wanted to create some kind of application that starts up very fast and doesn't use a lot of memory?
Well, that's one of the things, right? For many, many years, they're like, oh, well, Java's too slow and it takes too long to start up. And then they just stop there and they don't talk about all the other benefits of the JVM. But guess what? Java progress has been amazing. Java 21 has been an amazing new version, but we now have this capability to generate, and we've had it for a while, we can generate these native images, right? Since Java 1.3, Java is a compiled to bytecode language, and that bytecode can be moved to any platform, any operating system where there's a JVM. The JVM will interpret that bytecode and deliver your project. You can't do that with a lot of languages. But since 1.3, we had this hotspot JVM, this capability that said, I see that you're running this bit of code more than the rest. This is a hotspot of your code, so let's optimize it. And the JVM did that for you. It optimized that bit of bytecode and it turned it into native code for the operating system that it was running on. And our friends over at Graal Lab said, well, why don't we just do that for everything? It takes a little bit of time. Right? It's not an easy process to go through all of your code, all the branches, and figure out which code do we need to optimize. And if we do optimize it, what's the best way to optimize it? But Graal VM does that. So you can take your bytecode and you can convert it to native code. The problem is that native code doesn't work on any JVM. It doesn't work on a JVM. It'll run on the operating system and the architecture that it was built for. So it doesn't play nice. If I do a native image on my Mac, it will not run on my Linux, for example. But the results, if you can handle a little bit more of the ahead of time compilation, the ahead of time processing, then the benefits are much smaller footprint, much faster startup time. We're talking startup in milliseconds or dozens of milliseconds for some of these workloads. And the footprint, we're in the hundreds of megabytes instead of gigabytes for some of these applications. So because of all the wonderful work that has been done with Java and with GraalVM, we have another option for our Java programs with these native images.
Yeah, and we've talked about it in the past, kind of some of your different options to go to production. So go back and look through the archives on that, on where you're going to host your application. But there are a number of options out there. So take a look at that.
Dan, there was a question here in chat, and you said Josh's second favorite place was start.spring.io. The question here is, what is Josh's first favorite place? I just want to get that out there for those that are listening, because this is a great question. What is his first favorite place? And Jonathan answered it.
Production.
It's production. That's what we're trying to do. We want to get to production, and Spring makes that easy and enjoyable.
If all you're going to do is write a Hello World app that's on your machine, how is your mom ever going to see this? Come on.
Right.
We got to show mom and dad.
Absolutely.
And I know your mom and dad are watching. So
my mom, they're always,
hello, DaShaun's parents. You guys are awesome. I had another question in here. Where is it? Yes,
I got a couple starred. There you go.
So, hi, awesome. How you explain, where can I find concrete exercises through which you can guide me to better understand Spring Boot with Java in IntelliJ, and also do Azure AD with it, please? So I don't know about the Azure AD stuff, but I want to share something. So if you go over to spring.io, there's a good place here. If you go under Learn, again, the documentation I would always go to first. That's my first place. There's also this guide section where you can go through and like learn a specific thing. But there's also this Spring Academy, which is now completely free, DaShaun. We used to have a couple tiers to like get certified. You could still get certified. That's the paid portion now. But all the content on here is completely free. So our course on like building a REST API with Spring Boot, you can go through this. And the really cool part about this is a lot of this is interactive. So you're not using IntelliJ because this is like in a shell, in a browser, which every time you show it off, the last time we were in Toronto, developers were like, oh, that is so cool. How do you do that? But you get this interactive environment where you can follow along with the course and do the things in the terminal or the IDE right in the browser. So this is a really great place to start. I don't know that there's anything Azure specific on here, but
I don't think there is. But one of the comments is like, whoa, Spring Academy is fully free? Yes. Yes, it is. Thank you, Spring Team.
It is. Now, again, if you want to get certified, there's a fee for that to go take the certification. But other than that, everything is there and available to you.
This has been so cool. I loved the fact, again, just like going to a conference talk, I love the fact that you kind of shared like, hey, here's why I like iTerm. I like these built-in plugins. They give me something. I was certain when we started this episode that I was going to pick up something from you today, and I did, and I thank you. I wanted to say like, hey, maybe you're new to Spring, maybe you're new to Java. Spring is the place that you want to go. Get a little, figure things out. We talked about SDK Man is a great option. Doesn't work on Windows unless you have the Windows subsystem for Linux. You can do it there. We talked about having an IDE, integrated development environment, that'll give you some of the nice to haves, those plugins like you talked about in your iTerm. We talked about the build tools that are available, the Gradles, Maven, and you don't have to install them, right? If you go to start.spring.io, you don't have to install those things. So you can get started really, really easily. And then we also talked about getting to production. Containers are the new artifacts. And if you're just starting, then you probably already know that. You don't even know a jar file. You don't touch jar files. You put it into a container because it works on my machine. Now you ship your machine in the form of a container and it will work in production.
And you have a whole wide of hosting options that open up because you don't need a JRE somewhere, right? You can basically ship it everywhere that a container is supported. So
this has been fun. I hope that it was valuable for you, the audience. It was fun for me. I like to every once in a while step back and just kind of revisit the baseline, revisit our assumptions. We assume that you understand Java. We didn't talk about Java and how it's different from other languages. We touched on it a little bit. Bytecode, write once, run anywhere. That's Java. That's their slogan. That's what started it all. And thank you. And Spring makes it easier. The auto configuration that you get with Spring Boot, the release trains, so you're not having to do the version game, and then all of the starters that you can get in the Spring Boot ecosystem make getting to production so easy.
If you have been doing Spring Boot for a while, let's say you've been doing Spring in general for like 5+ years, try to go write a web application in Spring without Spring Boot. And just like see what it takes that talks to a database, right? Mm-hmm. See what it takes to kind of put that application together. And it will just remind you of kind of Spring's goal, right? Giving you the infrastructure and letting you focus on building out your application's functionality instead of worrying about all that other stuff. So right away, we talked about it. We got into our application. We opened it up in an IDE. And we were off and running. We wrote an endpoint that returned hello world. I didn't have to like set anything up. I just started like writing functionality, and that's really what it's about, right? So yeah, and it works across the ecosystem. When we want to get into like AI applications, we include a couple dependencies, and I add some configuration, and I'm ready to go. Like I start writing my AI application. I'm not fumbling around with how do I talk to OpenAI's GPT. Like it just does that.
And you usually get sane defaults out of the box. So if you grabbed the Olama starter, for example, I like the way Edu said this on one of his videos. He said, how did he say it? He said, think of
like Docker,
but for models. That's Olama. Like you can go grab all these models, you can run it inside of Olama. That's it. And I was like, oh, I like the way he said it. It was solid. Yeah. But if I grab that starter, it's going to look at localhost port 11434 or something like that, whatever the default port is. Same with Redis, localhost Redis port, Postgres, localhost Postgres port. It knows the defaults. It sees the starter. It has defaults with it. So you don't even have to do the configuration. If you've got Redis installed or Postgres or Olama, it's there.
Yeah.
All of these like nice little shortcuts that you don't have to think about. You can move. I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Thanks everyone for joining us on this episode 0 to Spring Boot. We have some interesting topics lined up for the next few weeks. I know, at least for me, DaShaun, I'm pretty sure you as well. We don't have a lot of traveling until maybe the end of August. So
end of August. That's
we're gonna have some fun.
I'm working on SpringOne right now. Like my focus is 90-10 SpringOne.
Yep. So yeah, I'm working towards SpringOne and this Spring Office Hours. So we are going to focus on some shows here. We have some ideas for topics, but as always, if you have some ideas for topics that you'd like to see us cover, please feel free to reach out. You can find us on the Bird app. You can head over to springofficehours.io to find out more about the show. And with that, we will see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.